The cash that's going to actually pay the taxes came from the DNR.
Right.
That's a good trick. That's
DNR
amazing.
DNR paid the taxes, paid the
DNR
lien,
was paying
and
the taxes.
replenished the
Yeah.
account to pay the interest payments.
I wonder if they knew that.
I want the hunters to do that.
Hello, Racine. We're talking about you. And who are we? We are George Myers,
Morning.
Jim Spodek,
Okay.
and Ken Jorgen. And we had such a good response to last week's show about Machinery Row that we decided, let's stick with a winning formula. People seem really interested in this topic.
Not only
And-
that, but there was another response, not to our show, but to what we talked about.
Yeah.
A guy by the name of Scott Letney was back in action.
Oh, yeah. This is a new development.
Yeah.
The city has now put in an appeal to the Court of Appeals asking that they overturn the judge's decision in Racine to let this thing move forward to trial. Now, if it moves forward to trial and the plaintiffs have got no evidence to support their claims, and it's just all fatuous and arbitrary and of no real significance or weight, the judge will recognize that in a hurry. What the judge in Racine says, well, you've made some very interesting arguments and claims. Let's move forward and look at the evidence.
Right.
That's the thing that has scared Mr. Scott Letney, the city attorney. I can't think of any other reason.
He's claiming that the appeal is so invalid that all it is a waste of time to go through the process of listening to investigating it. In other words, let's just get rid of this. There's no validity to the claim at all, and
Nothing to see here.
No, all you're doing is wasting money. It's going to come out the same way, and we should just the plaintiffs really have no thing. But
And he wrote a 40-page appeal, 40 pages. Now, talk about wasting time.
it's amazing.
Good grief. I mean, how long does it take to write
And the
something?
references that are in there, there's probably another 40 pages. Yeah, there's probably another 400 pages of.
Yeah.
You got to look at all the references that are in there and the number of pages in each one of those.
Well, I think
But
he
Jim,
calls
you're
it-
the masochist among us. George and I have tried to get through this. You actually got through it, and I don't know how you do that.
Jim
but you
reads
are-
900-page documents just for fun.
Yeah.
He's a dangerous guy.
No, I'll tell you what, though, that his claim is that Frederickson is not capable of handling this
Isn't it
case.
amazing?
I mean, who in the hell does this guy think he is? I mean, it's amazing. This is an attorney for the city telling a sitting judge, to the appeals court, I don't think this guy's got the...
Competency, but competency, it's not really a personal attack against the judge.
It's the fact of not understanding. There's something, here's the thing.
It's kind of a technical thing. I thought the same thing that you did. That he's telling the judge he's incompetent.
Yeah.
But a competency it's a different use of the term. But still, it's insulting.
Well, he wants this thing to be, sweep it
go
under the
away.
rug, get rid of it. And his claim is that the Zarian lawsuit that they did not file in time. And I mean, a lot of this was reference to that. They had a certain period of time to file. They didn't do it, so the case should be thrown out. What I think we're going to examine tonight is the fact that, no, it shouldn't be tossed out because there's fraud involved. Letney is claiming that, there was no straw man. This was all just an imaginary imagination of the plaintiffs. And, Judge, we can prove that we don't have it. But the fact is, he just wants to toss it before it even gets started, before there's discovery. And we have gotten a lot of it, and I kind of want to go through a little bit of this because we did last week go through some of the details in arriving to why Machinery Row was handled the way it was and who was involved with it. Now I want to kind of get into a little bit more of the straw man. Who was the straw man?
You think maybe Letney's trying to hide something?
Oh, I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I want to start here because we talked last week about the development and coming to the Common Council and borrowing $4.5 million to Rodney Blackwell, FDP, because he couldn't get the money. And there's all kinds of documentation. And I'm putting a timeline on the website, which will link itself to Facebook. So you can go on there and you can go through the whole timeline, and there's all links and emails attached to that. But he he didn't get the money. He just couldn't get the funding that he needed, and basically said, "Hey, I can't do the project." They said, "We're going to loan you the money, and you just act like you're buying it, and maybe you can get this. Maybe we can find some money for you down the road."
I got a question.
Yeah.
Is there any record of any of these lending agencies that Blackwell went to looking for funding for this?
Well, that's a good question, and that's what should be discovery on this. Was there did he go out and look for it? Did he see during this period of time, was there any activity by Blackwell to get funding? I kind of highly doubt it.
I kind of doubt it too.
Because I think what the city was doing was buying this piece of property because they wanted that property that we explained last week. And I think that Blackwell was, again, just a straw man. But here's where I want to go. On December 17th of 2014, now this is prior to the purchasing of the property and the lending of the money to Blackwell, the 4.5. That day was a common council meeting, but also the Racine Journal-Times put in the paper that development manager Jim Bowman said FDP would give the city a note for the loan and put at least $200,000 into a restricted escrow account to cover the city's 1% interest payments on the IGA loan for up to 24 months.
Now, Jim, just real quick, this Jim Bowman, these are project managers that aren't necessarily an investor or anything. They just kind of
Well, he's a
work
partner of
around.
Blackwell.
Yeah.
Oh, he is a partner of Blackwell. Okay.
That was a little
was.
sketchy. Was he a partner? Was he an agent? Was he a project manager? I never could get that quite locked in what exactly he was.
Because I remember in the arena they were looking at project managers. Right. Okay, but
Right.
So this is not that type of thing.
But he's telling the public, now this is in the newspaper, and I was published twice, that they're going to put $200,000 into a restricted account to pay the interest on the $4.5 million loan. So that's been sold to the public. The public is under the understanding that this taxpayer money, they're going to receive 1% interest payments on that $4.5 million.
And this is a date. Is this a date where we saw that Corey Mason presented to the Common Council the idea of using Rodney Blackwell, and this is all a great idea?
Great idea.
Good evening, Mayor, Alderman of the City of Racine. I'm thrilled to be here today. I think what you're going to do tonight will hopefully be part of something historic for the City of Racine. I think when people think about the funds that you're considering ahead before you, it was with the ambition that we could invest in things in the city that would be game-changing. So I can't think of a more appropriate use of the funds than a big project like this. And I would even challenge you, if it's not for a big and bold project like this, what would you fund it for? I mean, it's really a great opportunity you have in front of you.
Yep.
Now, and the impression that was always given was that 1% payments of interest on that loan was going to be coming out of FDP's pocket.
Correct.
That was always the way it was presented to the city council and to the public.
Correct.
What's the truth?
Well, the truth is, on now here's and I'm going to flash up a couple escrow documents. But on December 31st, the day of the closing, Blackwell draws back $30,000. Now, Blackwell had $30,000 that initially he gave to the sellers that he was going to put money down on the property. He gets that back. And now this is the day of closing, so checks are drawn out of this escrow account. Now, we're going to go to the escrow account, and Bowman, he gets a check for $31,000. And during this whole period, a total of $88,711 is taken out of this escrow account. Now, we talked about the escrow account last week, saying that that money was taken from the sellers. Well, now we have the documentation that shows where it was taken out of the first development agreement. Now, this agreement was drawn up by, I believe, Elaine Eakes from that the city hired. Now, because the city didn't want to get their hands dirty, they hired an attorney to do it. Now, this was the first developers agreement. Before I go into that, I want to explain one more thing, though. The city also had Azarian and Olson, another one, sign a waiver stating that the city has nothing to do with this, that there's no relocation, and that the city's not involved in this transaction at all.
That's on December 31st, where they signed that.
Yes.
They have the sellers have no relocation claims against the city.
Correct.
Is what, yeah.
But by law, because they're using taxpayers' money, they are by law required to do relocation.
Right.
But they're basically slipping one past Azarian and Olson. But here's the thing: if you're not involved, and Blackwell's a legitimate buyer Why are we setting up a?
Well, and what's amazing is the timeline on here. On December 17th, Corey Mason appears before the council.
Right.
The Journal Times article appears saying $200,000 is going to be put up by FDP. That's Rodney Blackwell to pay this money.
Correct.
2 weeks later, not a year later, 6 months, 2 weeks later, the agreement has changed, and the money for this payment is coming from the seller.
Now here's the thing.
Instead of Rodney Black, things don't. That much money doesn't shift that fast.
Exactly.
That's where it gets a little fishy. On December 17th, there was false information being put out. Is what we're saying.
Well, and now we dig up the developers agreement. We'll put it on the screen. You want to read it, Doc?
The blue part here?
Yeah, just the D.
At the real estate closing, 10% of the aggregate funds to be dispersed on a proportional basis as the separation as occurs to the sellers, approximately $450,000, shall be deposited into escrow, the escrow funds, with an escrow agent mutually agreed upon by the city and developer, the escrow agent. The terms of the escrow agreement related to the escrow account shall allow for the city to unilaterally withdraw up to $100,000 of the escrow funds from the escrow account for quarterly interest payments due on the note as described above. As such interest payments become due, and developer to unilaterally draw up to $350,000 for the reimbursement of development costs incurred by developer prior to and after the real estate closing adherence of the Machinery Row redevelopment project. Well, what's interesting there is this is in this agreement, but this is not. And I think that's where you're going. This was not what was being said to the city council.
Exactly.
Not on
And it's
December
not what was being
17th.
told to us as the public.
Now, what's real interesting that we found out just before the meeting. This is buried. This paragraph that Doc mentioned there is buried away in a 900-page document.
Who reads that kind of
Yeah,
stuff?
how does someone find that type of stuff? Who
You
does
got any
that?
ideas?
It's crazy.
He goes over and asks for 900 pages. No one was supposed to see this. It's buried away in a 900
you know
page
what?
Yeah,
document.
if you want to hide something, just put it together in 900 pages
It's a needle in the
and
haystack.
stick it somewhere where nobody will look, and you're good as gold, unless Jim Spotted is around.
Hide it in plain sight.
Yeah.
Of course, it's buried. But the fact is, this was the deal. This was the real deal that Blackwell signed. Now, when we talk about straw man, and he talks about, now there is nothing like this. Well, here you wrote it right into the developer's agreement that you're taking the money from the sellers. And by the way, when they shanghaied those sellers at closing, they said it was for environmental remediation on the property.
Exactly.
And here it says we're going to use it for interest payments.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's another thing on this 2-week thing between the big lie, Corey Mason up there with, in the Journal Times article, and 2 weeks later, a 900-page document shows up. I don't think so.
Yeah.
It takes a little while longer than that to prepare a 900-page
Right.
document.
No, this was all this was baked in the pie. Yeah. Now,
Well, they photoshopped it and they got it out of Google and good to go.
well, here's the other thing.
Doesn't work that way. Yeah.
No.
Boilerplate, George.
Yeah.
I want to skip ahead now. Now, at this time, the deal goes together. Now, if everybody from Racine remembers, nothing was happening. There was no development. The people were finally starting to ask, what's going on? I remember they were saying there were tenants in the building that needed to get out of there, and they had, truckloads of, whatever they had in there, and they had to get that out of the property, and this was going on, and that was going on. You got a $65 million project, and you're worried about some guy who's got soap dishes in a semi-trailer in one of these buildings, and you're holding up a $65 million project. That was when my light bulb went off, like something ain't right, something's wrong here. You'd be tossing that stuff out the window,
Totally public relations. Make it look like the
Exactly.
sellers of the property were responsible for the delays in the development.
Exactly.
And there was no real development.
Exactly.
Never has been. There still isn't.
Correct.
That's right. That was a push. I remember recall that. You had the feeling like the sellers were just, in the way. You know,
Yeah,
they're
holding
slowing
them
the
up.
project
Oh,
down.
Well,
yeah,
we're
it is.
champing at the bit here. We really want to get going on this, and these people aren't moving.
But you know, we talk about a $65 million project. You're talking about nickels and dimes, and you're holding up this project. The interest on that alone is staggering. The taxes are staggering, and the insurance is staggering. And you're letting this. Well, we're gonna have to wait till he gets out of the way. You're in there doing surveys and soil samples and all kinds of stuff. None of that was being done. So when you talk about straw man, a real developer would have been. He'd have been in there, and there would have been things going on.
Well, let's go back just a step to where Rodney Blackwell and FDP allowed their options to expire on that property.
Right.
And then the city came to him and said, oh, no, we need to keep you in the game.
Right.
And Blackwell never really showed any real interest in this project other than to function as a straw man.
Yeah.
So they said, we need to keep you in the game, so we want you to renew those options. And I'll tell you what, if you renew those options, if you don't get financing for this project, we'll give you that option money back. Not just the option money we're asking you for this time, but the option money that you put in earlier. So at that point, Blackwell goes, yeah, okay, I'm good with that.
He's got nothing.
How
Absolutely.
are you
nothing.
going to turn that down?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't turn it.
You get your $30,000 back that you put in on
You
a
don't have-
failing project.
George, you don't have a nickel in it. Matter of fact, that closing, they walked away with money.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's go to August 11th. Sandy Widener in September 16th said, hey, whoa, we found out that, interest payments were made by the sellers. But Sandy Widener sends an email and says to Tom Friedel and said, are the payments being made? And his response was, we request a payment at each of the quarter payments, and they have been receipted. Dave Brown and I have been closely following this process to make sure that the transfer occurs. There have been no missed payments.
Dave
That's
Brown, now
amazing.
there's a guy that you want monitoring finances.
Yeah. And here you go. You don't think there should be an audit on this? Now, when you talk about the
And
case,
where's the money coming from?
Right.
It's coming from the money that the buyers,
Right.
that the sellers have put in there.
Now, this is all stuff that'll come out in discovery.
Exactly. So when he writes this appeal, I'm like, yeah, you want to cover up stuff? Yeah, you want to cover this up?
Oh, yeah.
Because
Yeah.
this stuff comes up. If we've got it, you imagine how much more there is. Now, then I at this point, they're out of money. Now you have to remember, we're talking 3 years later. Now, basically they're out of money. They don't have any money left. Now, and it actually has an article that talks about the escrow is down to $22,000. They've got to get money because
Wasn't there some debt and indebtedness on the building too?
there was a liens on the building. Some of the contractors that went there to clean it out or knock something down wasn't paid. So
They
he
did some roof repairs on the one
something.
building. Yeah.
he put a lien on the property. So now you've got the Blackwell, who supposedly bought the building, is encumbers liens on the property. What does he care? He has nothing into it. So the city now is going to have to. There's a loan on the property, but guess who's going to pay it? Taxpayers are going to pay it. But also, he's not even around. At the second development agreement, Sandy Widener asked her, "Where is the developer? He's got an expired development agreement, and he's not even here. What kind of developer is this?"
Mr. Blackwell borrowed money from the city of Racine, cut a different deal with the sellers of the property, set up an escrow account for him to draw money out of over the last year and a half. I had no idea that I should even have asked the question of the administration if something like this would have happened. When this came to light, this is where, the city administrator kept saying to us, the council, well, he's paying his interest payments. He paid his interest payments with money that he took from the sellers that he renegotiated after we loaned him the $4.5 million. So in essence, we are paying that because we loaned him that money. I want us to have our eyes wide open about what kind of a developer we're giving another extension to. He didn't even have the respect for this city or this administration that negotiated with him or this council to come before us within that first 4 months when his extension had expired.
Of course, then they come up with a second development agreement. But here's the kicker.
This is another 900-page one.
This is a lot of pages too. I ain't counting them all. But the fact is, when it came to it, they needed money. How are they going to get the money? They sure couldn't back to the Common Council and say, gee, we need more money because we got these taxes to pay and we've got encumbrances on the building. So what they do is they go to the DNR and do a...
This is the promenade
This is
thing?
the promenade.
Promenade.
Yeah, exactly.
So they come in and say, well, Rodney
We're going to make a
Blackwell...
promenade.
A nice walkway,
Yeah.
you know, between the river and this
like
grand $65 million
I've never seen that
development.
picture of that in the paper and everything. Yeah,
Oh my
yeah,
gosh.
yeah.
Think about it. It's genius, really.
Yeah.
I'm going to go scam the DNR. So what they do is they take Rodney Blackwell is going to donate 5.5 acres of land along the river. He's going to give it to the city. Now, you have to understand, Rodney Blackwell isn't even in the game, but the city, he's going to donate 5 acres of part of the Azarian property back to the city. But the city said, we're going to go get a grant and have half of that paid.
And
Right.
the DNR
Yeah.
would do matching funds, right?
Right.
That's my understanding of it.
For
so
riverfront
when
development.
Rodney Blackwell gives $475,000 of city property back to the city that he allegedly owns,
That he
but
never
he doesn't
paid a
own
dime
because he's
for.
a straw man. So when he gives the $475,000 to the city, the DNR comes up with matching funds.
Correct. So they
The
give
DNR comes up with $475,000 cash, and guess what? Their little fund is now
filled up again.
rebuilt up.
But here's the thing. Doesn't Rodney have...
marvelous trick.
Shouldn't Rodney get the money? That's what I want to get to. The second developer's agreement.
All right.
The developer placed all proceeds from the purchase in a separate escrow with an escrow agent, approved by the city, establishing the project escrow as previously defined. The project escrow fund shall be utilized by the city in its sole discretion to pay for expenses related to redeveloping the promenade property, including but not limited to the following: pay for unpaid costs of demolition of a portion of 900 Water project building that extended into the promenade, and pay any real estate taxes currently owed on the property, to replenish the escrow account held by Landmark Title.
Now now let me get this straight. The only money that's really in there is not that land. That was just land.
That was just land.
The cash that's going to actually pay the taxes came from the DNR.
Right.
That's a good trick. That's
DNR
amazing.
DNR paid the taxes, paid
Since
the
DNR
lien,
was paying
and
the taxes.
replenished the
Yeah.
account to pay the interest payments.
I wonder if they knew that.
I want the hunters knew that.
You know,
who are doing,
Yeah,
paying all
what
these
happened?
license fees.
Okay, let's go one step further.
Yeah.
Harry Waite contacted the DNR and said, listen, you got fraud here.
Now, Harry Wade has been a guest on this program.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I talked to Harry about it. Harry emails, there's emails back and forth. I saw him. And it was like, wow. All of a sudden, that's
Well, I talked to the DNR too.
That's
And,
right.
the guy that I talked to, he was out of town at the time. He was at a family funeral, or somebody was dying or had just died, something like that. He says, I'll get in touch with you when I get back. But he says, well, I know Corey Mason. And I thought, oh boy, here we go.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what's happened.
So what happens here is
Certainly
that
got settled down,
there's a
yeah.
cover-up all along the way here. Now, I want to go one step further here before we, go on to
Yeah,
something
Corey
else.
probably gave him the lowdown, because we were surprised that the DNR backed off.
Yeah, backed off big time,
But
too.
now I see the connection.
I don't know if he gave him the lowdown or if he gave him the everything's fine.
Yeah,
and-
but Corey would have smoothed it
been
off.
some
Yeah,
delays.
everything's
Yeah.
good. Don't worry about it.
But after those
Don't
emails...
listen to those wild guys over on.
Yeah,
see
exactly.
on
But
TV.
after that email that Sandy sent asking about the payments on October 28th, 2016, Tom Friedel puts in his resignation that he's no longer to be city administrator.
Mm-hmm.
And then on December, now we're talking about them taking this DNR land to replenish the amount. Tom Friedel quits. In December, the city says, well, Blackwell's in default. I mean, the gig was up at this point. So everybody's got to go. Now, here's the part that is kind of tricky. When you talk about the cover-up, on February 11th, in the next bill, Governor Walker slashes the historic tax credits
yeah.
for the whole state of Wisconsin.
Tonight's Closer Look, one of Governor Scott Walker's budget vetoes, has some developers scrambling and unsure whether their projects can go forward because the governor put a $500,000 cap on the historic tax credit. It had been set at 20% of the total project cost. The legislature's budget put a $5 million cap on the credit program for rehabbing historic buildings, but Walker scaled that back, saying he objects to continuing this program with almost no limitation on the amount that can be awarded each fiscal year.
Remind people of is nobody's asking the city to go this alone. The state literally changed the law, in no small part because of this project, to bring historic tax credits to Racine, some other communities as well, but Racine specifically. And there's the potential of losing $9 million worth of credits if action isn't taken before the end of the year. I would hate to see that as a possible outcome of today. So nobody's asking the city to bear the brunt of it alone. You've had a bipartisan coalition of legislators work together to get this stuff done.
By the way, for anybody who missed the program last week, these tax credit was an integral part of this whole project. There was like $10 million, $9 million in tax credit, which, by the way, anybody can use instead of paying taxes. This is not a tax deduction. This is a tax credit. It's a full $9 million. So if a company has these tax credits and they owe $3 million in taxes, they can use $3 million of these tax credits to pay those taxes.
Correct.
And actually, those tax credits, that's something that you told me are marketable.
You're right.
Yeah, you can sell them from company to company. You can move them around.
That didn't happen here. That's one of
No.
the few crimes that hasn't happened.
Right. But here's what happened. I think what happened was now the gig is up. And I think Governor Walker thought, holy mackerel, if this ever hits the papers, I've got to cover my butt by saying, hey, these tax credits, we protected the tax credits.
Not Lily White, Scott Walker. He was.
Exactly. So anyway, he's protecting himself. Mayor John Dickert, and I can almost guarantee this, and I don't know this to be a fact, but I can tell you, Mayor, on the 27th of 2017, he decides he's going to go take another job at the Water Consortium or something. Now, this is a guy that would have loved to be mayor for the rest of his life, but he's going to take this other job. He got the word, you either get out of Dodge or there's going to be some problems.
Yeah.
That's what I think happened, because now...
It's going to be on you.
Exactly.
Wow.
Now,
Look out.
he didn't leave right
Pack
away,
your
remember?
bags.
Remember,
Yeah, no,
he
that's
didn't
right.
leave.
No,
Hung
he-
around for what, 3 months?
3 months. He's hanging around. Well, I'll tell you what, he is baiting these guys, saying, and he's talking like, well, they took my tax credits, and, he's blaming these Republicans. Well, I'm sure the Republicans are ticked. But the Taxpayers Association, George, which you're part of,
which I'm part of, that's
Sam
right.
Wallin steps up and says he wants him to immediately step down. And Sam Wallin is the former police chief's son, who is well connected. He was the Young Republicans for Racine County. So what's happening here is the Republicans are coming in saying, get this guy out of here, because if this fraud explodes, we're going to have egg on our face. Mm-hmm. So they were able to get John out of there, and who steps in right behind him? But Corey, who was just
happened to be walking down the hallway.
He probably had more to do with it than Dickens did.
Probably
When
did.
it comes right down.
Well, if that December 17th of 2014 presentation he made at the city council, saying what a great guy
Rodney Blackwell
is, and how this is going to really just change the landscape for the city. It's really remember you said it was going to be a big thing.
Absolutely,
This was going to be.
So that's where we're at right now. And then of course Sandy Widener runs for mayor, and then of course all that with her, we had to shut her up right away. So we had to get sealed courts and all kinds of things for Sandy.
That's right. Yeah, that's when all of a sudden she's before the ethics committee.
Yeah.
Right.
She's before the ethics committee. It's amazing.
And Jim and I are receiving emails from her, two evil people, as part of the evidence against her.
So let's this case should be let's put this in the appeals court and get this tossed out, because there's nothing here.
Yeah, shut this down. Because, man, it's getting drafty in here with my pants down around my ankles. I think that's where Letney is coming from.
What a game.
Yeah.
What a game.
You should be proud of your town. Anyway, we're going to leave this subject for another time. Explore a little bit of something that we mentioned, a couple times recently in the past. We haven't delved into it too deeply, but it has to do with Mayor Mason again, and his brother Chris, I believe it is, Professor Christopher Mason.
Is that what it is? Yeah, Christopher Mason.
And they have set up a laboratory over at the City Hall Annex over on Center Street to develop a COVID-19 testing procedure. Now, when you look at the CDC and you look at the Wuhan laboratory and all this, I mean, everybody's running.
China, or
they're
that you
always
think had
running
escaped?
around with these complete bodysuits
Yeah,
on, and and ventilation masks, and there's an airlock on the lab and everything, and they're very, very protective. Still, somehow, some of this stuff manages to get out.
Yeah.
But Racine, we don't need that. No, we'll set it up in the basement over at the annex. And the mayor's brother? Yeah, well, he's a good guy, and he's a scientist. Let's have him run the lab. What happens if something, God forbid, gets loose over there? I mean, there's a protocol for doing this kind of research, and it's not being followed. And we've got a lot of city employees in that building. What the hell happens if one of them gets infected?
Yeah.
And has a bad result? Do you think there'd be a lawsuit?
Oh, hell yeah, there would be a
This
lawsuit.
city has an insatiable appetite for lawsuits. It loves to be sued.
I don't understand how this could be past the city attorney, really. I mean, you look at it, you got to say, hey, whoa, we got some problems here. I mean, we're not doing it in a lab or setting up by the park and rec department or water department. It just doesn't make sense to me. And then say, hey, what if something does happen?
Yeah.
I mean, why take that chance? But yet, when I read this article, it said, well, they didn't have a specific answer. Well, yeah.
Well, we kill the viruses. We
Yeah.
get them and then we kill them.
Yeah.
But they're transporting live viruses, and
Yeah, somewhere it's alive. And,
Yeah.
we've seen that in the past. We talked about Legionnaire's disease. The ventilation
the
system.
ventilation system.
I mean,
Yeah, and
you
is
never
there-
know, but I'm saying, why take that chance? Is it really necessary?
I don't think there's a specific isolation procedure taking place over at the annex. I mean, could you do it that quickly in just a matter of a couple of weeks? I mean, it's only been a short
Yeah.
time since this was
Right,
announced and has been initiated.
I don't know.
I don't know. Well, anyway, that's something else to think about. We'll keep our eyes on that one.
No, I would
And-
really like to, because it's just not making sense to me that you would set up a lab in there, and the connection between the brother and brother.
I always go to
it's not a good
No.
indication.
It's not a
that-
good look.
No.
No.
And
Well, I mean, let's talk. Now you're going to bring some money in. I mean, I'm sure there's money he has to be moved in there somewhere to do certain things.
yeah, who's paying for this?
Yeah.
Well, Cornell University is paying a lot of it.
Yeah, no, but you know what? Where's the numbers? I mean, who's got the numbers? Let's look at the numbers. I mean, it's again a city project in a city building. Shouldn't we be able to look at those numbers?
Why
And to
isn't
see-
the research being done at the Cornell University, or why isn't it being done at the Medical College of Wisconsin?
Absolutely.
Well,
why is it being done in the annex?
if the familiar connection wasn't there, would it be there?
Yeah, well,
Do
exactly.
you think if you or I come in and said we want to set up a COVID testing lab in the City Hall annex, could we use a couple rooms?
I'm sure they'd hand you the keys and
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, a couple janitors over to clean that up for you, George. Yeah, paint the walls.
Do I look nice, guys? Do I look like a...
Yeah, I don't know. It's I don't know.
Well, keep your eyes and your ears open, folks, because there's a lot of stuff going on that you need to know about and consider at election time. With that, we'll leave you. Have a good day. Come back and see us next week.